All right. Good morning. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, well, this morning still, for the Journey to the Gavel, where the panelists will share their knowledge and provide insight into the process of becoming a member of the judiciary. This event is being brought to you by the Palm Beach County Justice Association, the Palm Beach County chapter of the Florida Association for Women Lawyers, to which I'm president-elect, and the Palm Beach County Sherrie Davis Cunningham Black Women Lawyers Association. Being a judge is a noble and respected profession. Our judiciary is extremely important as it functions to protect the constitutional rights of citizens as judges interpret and apply the laws to facts. Judges should perform their duties impartially and diligently, and diversity among the bench affords the citizens a chance to see a humanized figure helping make decisions that affect their lives, ones that look like their own. Now I'm going to pass it over to Sandra Perry-Moses to introduce our moderator and discussion. You're muted. Sandra, you're muted.
Don't we just love that when that happens? Hi, thank you, Heather. My name is Sandra Perry-Moses, and I am the president of the Sherrie Davis Cunningham Black Women Lawyers Association, and I have the pleasure of providing a discussion of the occasion. Today, this panel discussion is about the process to become a judge through the two paths available: the election process, with insight to this process provided by Judge Harper and that of Davicka Thompson, and the JNC appointment process, with insight provided by Judge Collins and that of Robert Harvey. All of the panelist bios will be provided by our moderator, Attorney Destinie Baker-Sutton. But first, a little bit about our moderator. Destinie is the founding shareholder of Destinie Law Firm PA, where she represents victims of catastrophic personal injuries. Prior to owning her own law firm, Destinie served as an assistant state attorney in Palm Beach County for over a decade. When she is not working, she dedicates some of her spare time to serving her community, focusing on initiatives that help underprivileged children. Without further ado, our moderator, Destinie Baker-Sutton.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today we will hear from four panelists: the Honorable Bradley Harper, the Honorable Sherrie Collins, Robert Harvey, who is the 15th Circuit JNC Chair, and Davicka Thompson. The Honorable Bradley Harper is the first Black person elected to the 15th Judicial Circuit County Court, and that was in 2016. Judge Harper was elevated to the Circuit Court bench by Governor Ron DeSantis in 2021. Judge Harper currently serves in the Circuit Court Civil Division, and we thank you for agreeing to serve on our panel this afternoon, Judge Harper. And you're going to be able to provide insight to our audience, being somebody who has been both elected and appointed to the bench. Thank you very much for being here. The Honorable Sherrie Collins was appointed as a judge of the county court in 2016 by Governor Rick Scott. Previously, she worked and was a very highly respected assistant state attorney in West Palm Beach and in the Florida Keys. She served our community as a prosecutor for 25 years. She is the administrative county criminal judge and handles county criminal cases. We thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here and to provide insight into the JNC appointment process. Robert Harvey currently serves as the chair of the 15th Circuit Judicial Nominating Commission for Palm Beach County. Robert was initially appointed to the JNC by Governor Rick Scott in 2015 and reappointed by Governor Ron DeSantis in 2019. Robert began his career with the United States Navy, where he served on active duty from 1987 until, I believe that's 1990. He served as a Navy judge, advocate, and special assistant U.S. attorney. Currently, Robert serves as general counsel for Enterprise Florida and as executive director of Florida Opportunity Fund Incorporated. We thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to help demystify the JNC appointment process. And finally, we have serving on our panel, Davicka Thompson. Davicka is a seasoned communications executive. She possesses extensive public service and private sector experience, having led several public relations and community outreach initiatives for more than 20 years. If you are here and you're interested in choosing the election process as your journey to the gavel, Davicka is the person who you would want to speak with. She plays a key role in soliciting public support for public awareness projects in South Florida metropolitan area. And we thank you, Ms. Thompson, for taking time out of your busy schedule to help demystify the election process. So let's move on. And before we begin our questions, let's talk about a few ground rules. Each panelist is going to be asked 2 questions from me, the moderator. We will then move to a question and answer block from the audience. We're asking you and the audience to remain muted at all times. And we also ask that the audience place any questions you may have in the chat box. Questions from the audience will be pre-screened to ensure that they do not violate any judicial canons or election rules. So my first question goes to Mr. Harvey, and I ask all of you to keep your responses, if you can, to 2 to 3 minutes so that we can cover as many questions from the audience as possible. So Mr. Harvey, there are many people in the audience today who may be starting their journey to the gavel. Will you explain the Judicial Nominating Commission? What is it? How does it work? What are some tips for people who would like to consider it?
All right, good morning. Still morning, thank you. Judicial Nominating Commissions, what is it? JNCs, I'll just use that term throughout today. They exist to select nominees to fill judicial vacancies within the Florida court system. Statewide, we have 28 now separate JNCs. You have 1 for the Supreme Court. You have 6 for each District Court of Appeal. You have 20 for each circuit and county courts contained in that circuit. And you have 1, which is the statewide commission for judges of compensation claims. JNC members serve 4-year terms. And also JNC members are ineligible to seek an appointment from a JNC from where they have served for 2 years after leaving that JNC. Each Supreme Court, Appellate District, and Circuit JNCs consist of 9 members. All of those 9 members are appointed by the governor. 4 of those members are appointed by the governor from lists that are certified to the governor from the Board of Governors of the Florida Bar. And the governor then directly appoints the remaining 5 members. How does the judicial nominating process work? Just in briefly, a judicial vacancy may occur in many ways. There can be a resignation, retirement, death of a sitting judge, elevation of a judge, or maybe even the creating of a new judgeship. Once there's the notification of a vacancy, the governor requests the chair of the JNC to convene the JNC for the purpose of selecting and submitting names of qualified applicants. So we're not a constantly sitting body. We're a group of volunteers who convene upon the direction of the governor once there's a vacancy. So the JNC then investigates each applicant, meaning that we review their application, we call their references. We may choose to interview some or all of the applicants, and then we deliberate, and there has to be a majority vote to recommend applicants to the governor for his consideration, to pick the judge. So I always tell people, we put the list together, we don't pick the judge. So generally we have no more than 60 days from the time that we are convened. Usually that's 30 to 45 days. And that can change, but the maximum time is 60. And finally, once we certify names and send them up to the governor, the governor has 60 days to appoint a judge from that list. So that's the brief overview.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. And, you know, we're going to be here for an hour, so I do want to just follow up with a quick question. And if there's anyone in the audience that has a question for you or one of the other JNC members, is it okay for them to reach out to you or your colleagues?
Sure. I mean, if generally, if there are questions about an application, the sort of the administrative parts of the application, they reach out to me as the chair just for sort of technical questions. There's really no prohibition on, you know, applicants reaching out to JNC members. However, for best practices purposes, the JNC members, A, they won't speak to applicants while we're convened. B, it's actually up to each JNC member to decide whether or not to engage in that. You know, some JNC members absolutely will not talk to applicants. They don't think it's appropriate. Others will. So, you know, it's on a case-by-case basis. And, you know, I guess my general advice is that, you know, it's not a political campaign. I know we're going to talk about political campaigns also this afternoon. You know, I think the preferred way is to let a strong application and your references represent you. But, you know, there's no prohibition. And, you know, I've spoken to candidates in the past and have not spoken to candidates in the past. So it just depends.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. That's very helpful. Ms. Thompson, will you explain the election process, what it entails? In addition, will you provide some insights based upon your extensive experience regarding the criteria for a winning campaign? And you're muted. It's okay.
Firstly, thank you all for the opportunity to speak. It's always a pleasure to share information and knowledge about the judicial campaign process. So I'm always here for any questions or concerns that you may have. The elections process, there's a process before the elections process that I wanted to get into first. Before deciding to become a candidate, do your due diligence and start the process several years out with beginning a strategic plan that's intentional about why you're deciding to run, and be clear about that why. You want to start to lay the foundation to build a strong network and gain some visibility and build your brand. Get to know key community stakeholders outside of the legal community. I think that sometimes it's not understood that while the legal community is certainly helpful in working with you during the elections process, you're speaking to the county at large. Mm-hmm. So anywhere from 200,000 to 300,000 voters that you're trying to get your message across to, you need to make sure that you are developing those relationships with the community at large. And you want to look for opportunities to educate and inform, all of these ways to help keep your name at the top of mind once you do decide to file and become a candidate. Meet one-on-one with judges, especially those who have run for office and can give you valuable advice to get you started. Before you file, visit with partisan groups to forge relationships with key players. Once you file, because it's a nonpartisan race, you're not able to really convene with partisan groups. So before you do that, visit with them and forge those relationships. Then you'll want to move into the process of interviewing and selecting a campaign consultant who will help you design and craft a plan that identifies your base, develop your campaign pillars and messaging, help form that steering committee, which is going to be your North Star during your campaign, and drafting a timeline. I would also suggest that you familiarize yourself with Judicial Canon 7 and the Campaign Treasurer's Handbook to have a working understanding of the do's and don'ts of campaigning. Of course, your campaign consultant should be the ultimate guide with regard to those two documents, but having that understanding will help and go a long way. You'll then file as a candidate. There are several documents that you'll submit to either the local supervisor of elections office if you're running for county court, or the state division of elections if you're running for circuit court. Can't fundraise until you filed, so fundraising is a key component with campaigns. So the sooner that you know definitely this is what you want to do and have that plan in place. It's best to file as early as possible so that your steering committee can start to execute your fundraising plan. You'll then qualify as a candidate. So that's usually around April, May, depending on the calendar. It's done during a qualifying period where you submit a qualifying fee and documents to the State Division of Elections in Tallahassee. And from there, you're working your campaign plan, building that excitement for your run, meeting with constituents several different ways. You're building your coalition of volunteers and surrogates to help you in campaigning activities. To answer your second question, at the end of the day, it's really in the voters' hands, but you can best set yourself up for success by being diligent about understanding the campaign process. I think that's really important. You have to strategically utilize your network. You're not going to be able to be in every place at every time, and you're going to have the most hectic schedule. So being able to utilize your network to have people who speak highly of you in place for you in places where you cannot be will help set you up for success. Again, fundraising is your top priority so that your campaign can utilize as many tools as there are available to help win votes. A strong steering committee will ensure that the candidate can focus on campaigning solely. So you want to make sure that when building that steering committee, you have people who are strong, who are not afraid to make asks on your behalf. Not everyone will be a strong fundraiser, so however you can utilize them, whether they are there to rally up your volunteers or make calls on your behalf, you want to make sure that you're utilizing their strong points. You want to be prepared for forums, endorsement screenings, and other opportunities to drive home your message. Know the law and stay abreast of current events as they relate to the law. Know your audience and tailor your message as necessary. You'll be speaking to diverse groups of people from all walks of life across the county. And answer questions. You know, when you're in these forums, a lot of times you're asked questions that as a judicial candidate, you may not be able to specifically answer because it may be a case that may come before you. But rather than just saying outright that you can't answer the question, come up with ways to be able to pivot and still be relatable in your response. I think that the frustration of potential voters is always when they've taken their time out to come to a forum to learn more about you and the judiciary as a whole. And the whole time it's, I can't answer that question, or their questions and answers of no substance. I would encourage you to take a public speaking class if necessary, because you are going to be in front of people a lot and you want to make sure that you are as eloquent as possible in getting your message across. And you want to be relatable. You want to meet, again, you're going to meet voters from all walks of life. So you want to be able to build a warm rapport, which goes a long way in helping garner support and votes. You're going to meet folks from Palm Beach to Tamarind. So you want to be able to build rapport with them. You have to stay nimble and open. Campaigns, the day-to-day campaign life is a toil. You're going to be pulled in numerous places. So you want to make sure that you stay nimble and know that this is probably one of the most difficult endeavors that you will undertake. So you're going to be putting yourself out there to be scrutinized by the public, and there may be negative attacks from your opponents on the campaign, but you don't want to get distracted. You're going to stay focused on that why and your will to win. And those are recommendations for success.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. So my next question is to Judge Collins, and we heard a lot from Ms. Thompson about, you know, the planning that goes in when you're running an election. Judge Collins, you know, you were appointed by the JNC on the very first try, which is amazing. And so my question to you for the audience is, when did you know that you wanted to start pursuing this particular career path? And how did you prepare for your career path going through the JNC process? And in answering these questions, please let the audience know what skill sets you believe are important to possess for the JNC process.
All right, so thanks and good morning, everyone. So there were two or three really significant experiences that I had as I was a CLI, as a young lawyer, that really imprinted on me. And one is I was in Miami in the late 80s, early 90s, as sort of certified legal intern working for Janet Reno's office when 4 or 5 sitting judges were indicted under a federal courtroom, Operation Courtroom. And that really had a lot of impact on me in terms of how the court system was seen from the outside and how these judges really took what they were supposed to do and had it completely backwards with the bribery and the other things that were happening. So that was a really big impact on when I was a young lawyer. And then when I was a young prosecutor in the Keys, there was a judge who was also removed by the JQC for misconduct. And just seeing that there are amazing judges that are in our communities and that they, give up the money and private practice to really serve the community, kept it on my radar, but it really wasn't front and center. For most of my career, I focused on what I was doing. And I thought about putting in when that one judge in the Keys was removed in the late 90s, but right around that time, my oldest child was diagnosed with autism, and it was a huge undertaking, both financially and personally in terms of time. And so I put it on the back burner for quite some time to raise my family. Because anyone who is going to do their job right as a judge, anyone who thinks it's easy and it's less time than being a litigator is wrong. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of energy, it's a lot of behind the scenes that you all don't see. So I did put that on the back burner, and I really focused on my other career. And I agree with Bob Harvey. I think that the best thing that you can do in terms of preparing yourself to be a judge down the road is to be the best that you can in the job that you're in. You want to make sure that you are the person who knows the law. You want to be the person who is ethical, who is above board, who everyone looks at and says, that is someone who I want to emulate. That is someone who does the job. And so I did my best to really focus on what I was doing. And I would do my full-time job at the state attorney's office, and then I'd go home and do my full-time job as a parent. And sometimes one had to give and sometimes the other would have to give. But it was later on when my kids got older that I was able to say, okay, now is the time that I'm going to go for this. And actually I did not get first time out, one and done. I actually applied in 2009. And I did not even get out of the JNC. And I think that really, I learned a whole lot of how to do it wrong. And so when I put in again in 2016, I did it completely differently.
Well, that's important to know, as we sit in the audience, a lot of times, people think it might be easy or that you will get it on the first try. I thought you got it on the first try.
I did not. I actually applied in 2009 and didn't get out of JNC. And then I put in 2010 and my boss made me pull it out. So.
All right. Well, that's great advice. So my next question is to Judge Harper. Judge Harper is a judge who's been both elected and appointed when he was elevated to the circuit court. And so I'd like you to speak a little bit to the audience about the skill sets that you believe are important for a candidate to possess in both the election and the JNC process. But when you're speaking about this, maybe talk a little bit about which skill sets are more desirable for one track over the other. You kind of compare and contrast. You're muted, by the way.
I said definitely, and Judge Collins and Ms. Thompson did such a great job. This should be easy for me. Some of the considerations that I think you need to consider when either seeking appointment or seeking election is, number one, you need to have established a reputation as a good lawyer and a person who practices with professionalism. I think that people, when they're looking at evaluating candidates for judge, they want to see somebody that they could see as a judge. And so if you are not demonstrating that in the way that you practice, then you create a barrier to the ability to elevate. Judge Collins brought up an important point about her employer. And when you start pursuing the judiciary, you need to think about the conversations that you're going to have with either your employer or your partners or whoever, your clients. All of those people are affected. And one of the best pieces of advice or questions that someone posed to me when I was getting ready to run is, what are you going to do about your practice? What are you going to do about your clients? Because running a good campaign it's really a full-time job, particularly when you get down to the latter parts, when time is running out. You have to spend a lot of time, and you don't want to be in a position where you're neglecting your firm, your practice, your partners, or your clients. And so you need to have a plan in place for how you're going to address those things, both leading up to an election and after an election. And the last part about elections that I didn't think about until that conversation was, I was elected in August. And you want to think about whether for a campaign, whether it's going to go, you're in a race that's going to end in August, or you're in a race that's going to end in November, because those are two very different elections. And I won't go into detail about that. But I was elected in August, but my term didn't start until January. And so what are you going to do between the time that you're elected and the time that you start your job, particularly if you've had to wind down your practice in the intervening time? And so those are just some of the considerations that I think you need to think about. Skill sets, the one that I would hone in on for people that run campaigns, I see a lot of people, and you can do it, but if you know you're interested and people are running campaigns for different things all the time, why wouldn't you take the time to volunteer for a campaign so that you can begin to understand the lay of the land before you begin interviewing consultants, and you have literally no idea who is who, what consultant does what. You don't know the difference between a campaign manager and a campaign consultant. Those are the types of things that you should know going in, so you don't have to learn on the job, so to speak.
Thank you, Judge Harper. My next question is for Mr. Harvey. We've been talking about obviously elections versus JNCs, and for people who are considering which path they want to take, should someone who would like to become a judge, should they choose one path solely over the other path, or does it hurt them, in other words, to maybe try to do both? Maybe they put their name in and they run.
That's a great question. I mean, I think that, first of all, just in general, whatever path that you choose, I think you need to prepare early. And, you need to prepare it from, looking at your career and looking at your perception and standing among the bar, among the community. I mean, those all will go into, sort of the calculation of whether or not you end up winning an election or making it through the JNC process. I think but you have to ask yourself, I think, like a threshold question. If you want to choose the JNC process, you have to be able to ask yourself, why do I want a gubernatorial appointment now at this time in my career? And then you have to ask the same question about, why do I want to, run in a campaign? Because, a campaign, I mean, it probably takes up much more of your time. Although I will tell you that the application process, the application is daunting, so that needs to be started well ahead of the time that you decide to put your name in, because that is the first that's the first thing that JNC members see is an application. So the quality of that application is very important, and you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. So if they see a bad application, you're already, up against it a little bit. Now, in terms of, should you choose one path or the other? I don't think it hurts. It certainly didn't hurt Judge Harper. Okay. So, there are a number of judges, to name a few. I mean, I think Judge Delgado and Judge Cheeseman, Judge Willis, all came before the JNC and all became elected judges and are fantastic judges. So I don't think it matters. I mean, and we just had Judge Sipperstein just became elected. So it's just a very different process. And running may not work for people from a financial perspective. There's as been said, there's a lot of fundraising that certain people just may find that it's just not for them. On the other hand, timing matters. A person may not just want to wait around for openings to occur so they can apply. And then, elections come, with its own regularity. And so that may fit someone's schedule and from a professional standpoint. And, what's happening at the office may impact, whether it's time to run or move on for whatever reason. So I wouldn't discourage potential candidates from choosing either path. It's certainly not held against candidates who come before the JNC, the fact that they've run in the past.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's such a great answer. Ms. Thompson, in 2016, Palm Beach County elected its first Black person to the judiciary, who's here with us today, Judge Harper. And then in 2018, Palm Beach County elected its very first Black female and Jamaican to the judiciary, the Honorable Maxine Cheeseman. So 2 questions. As a non-lawyer and as an elections consultant, what do you hear people saying in the community about the importance of diversity on the bench? And also, my second question, as an expert in elections, what advice do you have for women or members of minority groups who are interested in running, but fear perhaps discrimination in the process? And maybe that's something that's stopping them from doing it.
Thank you for the question. So with regard to the first question, the pulse in the community is that they thoroughly understand that diversity is needed on the bench. We've seen an uptick in engaging and educating the community from different organizations, civic organizations, the Divine Nine, NAACP Urban League, to make sure that communities of color in particular understand how crucial it is to not only vote, but to have a diverse judiciary. So knowledge is not the problem. I think the problem comes in with action and really firing up those bases to go out and make their voices heard at the ballot box. I think a primary example would be, you had a judge who unjustly sentenced a young man to jail for oversleeping and being late to jury duty. And there was this huge uproar, specifically from the Black community. Our community leaders hosted news conferences on the courthouse steps. There were editorials. There was this call for resignation. And then when there was a capable and well-qualified candidate who stepped up to run for that judge's seat, and that candidate also happened to be a woman of color, that fire, those voices were not as loud. There were peers who looked like that candidate, who have sons that look like that young man who was sentenced, that didn't support. So we understand the need for diversity, but when it really comes to standing in that and taking action and making it happen, that's where the frustration and concern comes in. With regard to the second question, I can't say that any of the candidates with whom I've worked have experienced overt discrimination. So fear of discrimination, I think, would be the least of concerns. I would not let that deter a candidate from pursuing a path of wanting to become a judge through the electoral process. If anything, if there is an experience where there's some act of discrimination occurring, I would encourage my candidate to allow that to be an opportunity to demonstrate why they would be a great jurist, because they're going to, if they are victorious, have many different folks from all facets of life come before them. And some of those people aren't going to like them because of their gender or sexual orientation or race. But they, as a jurist, will have to be able to build that bridge to understanding and be that beacon of light that rises above any discrimination. So it's a prime opportunity to really showcase why you should be elected as a judge if you come into that role. Again, it's not anything that anyone should fear. People who look like you won't support you. So you have to get past that, and you have to be able to stand and again, why you decided to run, and know that support will come.
Thank you. A very good answer. Judge Harper, my last question to you. This event is obviously being hosted by the Palm Beach County Justice Association, the Palm Beach County Chapter of Fall, and the Palm Beach County Sherrie Davis Cunningham Black Women Lawyers Association. All of these organizations promote and encourage diversity in the legal profession and in the judiciary. But what more can the legal community and the voluntary bar associations do to encourage diverse candidates to run or seek an appointment? What's your best advice that you had as a diverse candidate along the way? You're muted.
To answer the first part of the question, the work that a lot of the voluntary bar associations are doing today was not happening yesterday. And so I think that you're to be applauded for continuing to have discussions around what's going to make our community better and our judiciary better. And in addition to those things, I should say in continuation of those things, just continue to look for opportunities where interests may converge. Myself, along with other judges, have worked on jury duty, the responses of jurors, who's being reached, who's not being reached, our turnout rate, if I can call it that, for jurors who have been summoned is usually somewhere on average around 20%, can go up to about 27%. So for every 100 people that are summoned by court order to appear for jury service, only about 20 people are actually showing up. And there are questions surrounding what does that do with respect to our court system and the administration of justice in our system when so few people are participating in the process. I've heard young people, and as we go into the schools, myself and many of the judges, to talk about the justice system, express concern and frustration about whether the justice system is fair and what we should do about that. And so having those conversations, and I explained to them that this is our justice system. And although there may be historical things that are happening, which are important that you know and that we talk about, you have to be involved as a participant in the system if you want it to make it better. And if you take the position that you're not going to vote, you're not going to be involved, then you relinquish that power to someone else. So there's the jury duty. There's also a task force. So the MacArthur Foundation has given money to our Criminal Justice Commission to reduce, part of that money is to reduce the population of people in the county jail, which is usually, if you're in the county jail, you're charged with or convicted of a misdemeanor crime. And they're focusing on pretrial detention a lot. And so if you have a concern about or a desire to improve the justice system, then the people that have that interest and that desire should look to be a part of. There's a racial equity task force that is, we've implemented things such as a text messaging system, which may sound trite, but There are quite a few people. It reduced the number of people that were going to jail for not appearing by a significant margin for a felon to show up for court. And to wrap it up, that's significant because not only is there a significant cost burden, a significant number of law enforcement officers that are taken away from other things. In order to do that, there's a significant tax on business. These people aren't working and other things. And so by implementing something as simple as that, which was paid for by a foundation, we were able to improve the administration of justice. And so as you're talking about diversity and what diversity means, I think it's also helpful to have discussions about what that means as a practical matter to the administration of justice, and what judges, all judges, no matter what race or color you are, we all have a responsibility to seek to improve the administration of justice, and those conversations need to continue to happen.
Thank you, Judge Harper. Before I ask my last question to Judge Collins, I do want to remind everyone that you can put questions in the chat box, and after Judge Collins answers, we'll be taking questions from the audience. Judge Collins, just almost like a catch-all at this point, you know, we've been having all of these discussions about all of these different topics. You know, what's the best advice that you have for somebody interested in perhaps starting their journey to the gavel?
Well, first thing I would say is people think, oh, I have to join this certain organization, or I have to go and be involved in these activities. There's no magic formula for what makes someone attractive to either the governor or to the voters. Reality is, find something that you love doing in the community and in your practice. And if you have a passion for it, do it. And, you know, focus on that. And if you're, you know, a wonderful part of our community, both legal and personal, it'll show. And then be yourself. And then don't wait. You know, I feel like I really put it on the back burner for quite a long period of time. I didn't apply until I was a 25-year member of the bar. And now looking back, I wish I had gone earlier, but there was always something that got in my own way. I put my family first, which was important. But then there was other times I was like, you know what, maybe it's not my time, or I'm not ready. And I would say that it's definitely, for most people, it's a marathon and not a sprint. And you need to get, it's a 10-minute interview with the JNC. And so there's something to be said for, if you're going to do it and do it right. And like I said, I applied the first time in 2009, and I really didn't know anything about the JNC. I hadn't read the application too much in advance. I didn't let someone read my application for me to give me insight. And I think that was, that was the wrong way to do it. If you're going to do it, do it right. Take the time on the application. Be careful with it. Talk to people who have been through the process and ask for their advice. And then again, just go in there and be yourself, because you'll know when you're ready, because you've got the skills and the authority to be able to stand up for yourself and be the candidate that will be able to get through. But it is definitely a marathon. And when you're waiting for that call from the JNC, it's nerve-wracking. When you're waiting for the call from the governor's office, it's exhausting. And you've got to continue to be ready to do it more than once.
Thank you. We do have a question that was sent directly to me, and it's to you, Judge Collins. And it says, you mentioned that there was this, quote, one thing that you significantly changed from your first application to the second. What was that drastic difference between your 2009 and 2016 applications?
The 2009 application, I did it all on my own. I looked up the application, I downloaded it, I filled it out, and I said, I've got great experience, I've got a great reputation, I'm just going to do this. And the big thing that I did the next time when I chose to do it is I reached out to people who were involved in the process, who had gone through the JNC process. I had someone review my application. I reviewed somebody else's application who let me read theirs, just to see someone who was successful. So the difference was doing it in a vacuum versus getting advice.
Very good. Judge Harper, how do you sell yourself to the JNC in an interview? And then how do you sell yourself to the people on an election campaign?
You don't sell yourself. That's part of the problem. when you sell yourself short. And whether it be the voters who are checking you out, who a lot of which, the ones that are definitely involved, a lot of the voters, all of them are very intelligent voters. You just have to reach a lot of them, are the JNC members, or the governor's office. If you hear conversations from the general counsel about people who come and pander and do things that they think are going to impress them, I think that, you know, if you have established a reputation for yourself over a period of time, you have to rely upon that and be honest and act with integrity. There may be one party in power now, there could be another party in power later, but the people that we know and deal with in this community, we're all going to be the same for the most part. And so you need to determine whether you're going to be a person that bends and sways according to what popular thought, opinion, or whatever it is, or whether you are going to behave like a judge who is a person that should be free from the appearance of partiality, a person who will not be swayed by outside opinions, but that's going to apply the law to the facts of the case. And I think sometimes when you try to sell yourself, you demonstrate the opposite of exactly what you should be demonstrating as a judicial candidate.
I think that's just powerful. You know, when you sell yourself short. I think that's just very well said. Thank you. We have a question to Ms. Thompson. How long in advance of starting a campaign do you recommend speaking to and hiring a campaign consultant?
I would say a few months out. So ideally, especially with campaigns where fundraising is a main concern, you want to be able to start to do that at least 9 to 12 months out from election date. So as Judge Harper stated, you have the primary election, and then you have the general election if you have to go that far. So working with a campaign consultant early on, a few months before you decide that you want to file as a candidate would be ideal, so that you can get that strategy in place and really understand what is going to be required of you as a candidate as you start to embark on that process.
Thank you. And I just want to remind those in the audience that you can keep sending me questions directly. If you don't want others to see your questions, that's fine. And keep the questions coming. We're going to be here for another 5 or 10 minutes before we wrap up. So the next question I received to Ms. Collins: how do you prepare for the interview with the JNC?
So, again, the first thing I would say is talk to someone who's been through the interview process recently and ask what questions they asked. The other thing is that the JNC interviews are open to the public, and if someone wants to come, they can watch the JNC interviews, and it's very interesting. They also have transcripts available of the JNC interviews, but each interview that I've seen is unique. They tend to ask questions about your application. They tend to ask questions about you. So again, know yourself, be yourself, and have your application be strong on its own.
Thank you. And Mr. Harvey, I'd like to ask that same question to you. What do you recommend people do in the preparation of their preparing for their interview with the JNC?
Well, I would say I would agree with Judge Collins. I think it's very important to talk to other people who've been through the interview process. You certainly can come and watch interviews, but each interview is different. Sort of to borrow from both the Judge Collins and Judge Harper, I'd say, be yourself, don't sell yourself, because the first thing that, comes out is whether or not a candidate is being authentic about themselves, about why they want to be a judge. And so that's very important. So even when you're preparing for your interview, so to speak, I think you have to be focused on not what you say, but how you say it, and just to try as much as you can to be yourself. And if I can say that you have to take the high road, and sometimes it's a longer process than you'd want it to be. Judge Harper was certified several times to be a circuit court judge. We always found him to be highly qualified, and he interviewed and did not get picked. And he was a class act every time he came back to the JNC and to give it another shot, and sort of, didn't quit, but also remained like highly professional through the whole process. And that really just doesn't come through at the JNC level. I think that comes through in Tallahassee. So, I mean, I think you have to take the long game is the game, especially if you're being certified and you're making it onto lists, then you have to stay positive, and you have to stay, authentic and sort of above the fray. And he's been a perfect example of that. And I'm sure he would have preferred not to make that drive and be picked, instantly. And that one and done is a very rare instance. Even I thought Judge Collins was a one and done, but I wasn't around. I wasn't around in 2009 when she first applied. So.
Well, let me ask you one more question, Mr. Harvey. Who interviews you, and can you find that out beforehand?
Generally, the person who interviews you is the person who has the primary responsibility for vetting your application. Generally, among the 9 members, those applications are given to a specific member to call the references and do the deep dive, and that's the person who does the initial questioning in the interview. It's generally not a secret. I mean, if you're a candidate and you're sort of tight with your references, you sort of quickly find out maybe who's calling you, and they usually call and say, I'm calling you, Judge Collins, because you're a reference for so-and-so, and I'm vetting his or her application. So yeah, I mean, it's not a state secret. So it can be found out, and that's the person who's usually leading the questions. But I wouldn't focus so much on that person, because they're there to do, introductory questions, and then it's opened up to the rest of the commission, and then anybody can ask you a question. I would say, sort of in closing though, is, since I've been the chair, I've always allowed candidates to make a 2-minute opening statement, because the 10-minute interview process is very short. And to me, I always wanted candidates to at least have their own 2 minutes of time to put their best foot forward and make their case. So I think that 2-minute opening it's important to focus on what you want to say in that period, but also to stick to it and not let 2 go to 4, because now people are saying, well, now we have a potential judge who can't manage time. And it starts to cut into, other questioning from the panel. But use that opening statement to your advantage.
Judge Harper, there was a reference that Mr. Harvey just made to driving up to Tallahassee. Can you explain that reference, and also maybe tell the audience members what the cost is to go through the JNC process?
Yeah, so I don't have a number. It's a lot less expensive than than running a campaign. I didn't keep count of how many times I went to Tallahassee, but I'm pretty sure it was more than 4, and sometimes multiple trips. And so when you apply and go through the local JNC, there's not really a cost associated with that. But when you get a call, or when your name goes up and you get a call from the governor's office that they want to interview you, and they're going to do it in Tallahassee, and this is the date, then you have to make adjustments and figure out how you're going to get up there. And there's no easy way to get to Tallahassee. There's a long drive or a long flight, and on short notice. And so, I've spent several hundreds of dollars making that trip. And I would certainly think in the thousands of dollars making it over multiple occasions.
Thank you. And real quickly too, you also referenced the cost of an election. What would somebody be looking at spending roughly if they were to run for office? And maybe Ms. Thompson could chime in as well.
You have, I defer to Ms. Thompson, but you should be looking to raise in the six figures. And we've had candidates that have not necessarily raised, but who have funded their campaigns in the $400,000 to $500,000 range. That doesn't necessarily mean you'll win. We've seen that. But if you want to be able to reach voters, then it's very costly to reach voters in Palm Beach County. And I think we have over 1 million registered voters in Palm Beach County now.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson, I'll let you chime in there.
Certainly, thank you. You're really looking at about $1 per voter that you're looking to budget for. So with your primary and looking at previous data, seeing how many eligible voters there are and what you are looking to go toward, if that's 300,000 voters, then you're looking at $300,000 ideally. And it gives you that comfort to be able to communicate with the diverse number of voters using the many different vehicles that are out there to do that. Again, not every candidate is able to raise that amount of money, so we have to be very strategic in how we communicate with voters, but ideally you're looking at $1 per voter when you start to develop your budget.
Thank you. And I have a question that came in for Mr. Harvey. And the question is experience in any particular type of practice area looked upon more favorably than others to the JNC?
No. In short, we receive applicants from all sorts of practice areas, both criminally, civilly. So there's no magic practice area that we're looking for.
Thank you. All right, I think that those, give me 1 second. Oh, okay, yeah. And so I'm going to ask this question to Judge Collins. Somebody raised the issue that when you're comparing these two different paths, they're pointing out the fact that, even if you are appointed, you need to be ready to run a campaign. So maybe you can speak on that a little bit.
I mean, absolutely. When I was at the governor's office, that was one of the questions that I got asked. They said, are you ready to run a campaign? And, luckily here in Palm Beach County, we have a wonderful bench and a relationship with the punitive bench and the bar where, routinely the good judges are just not run against. And so we don't have that issue. But, understanding that a lot of people think that when you take over a seat as an appointment, you take the term that the person had before you, and that's not true. What the Constitution says is that when you take a seat by appointment, you run in the next general election that's more than 12 months out. So as soon as you take the seat, if your election is 13 months out, you could get an opponent right away. And that did happen to Judge Kiva Agrama. And, it was just because she was appointed, someone decided to run against her. So when you are seeking the appointment process, don't think it means you don't have to run, because you might. And so you should be ready to run. You should know who would be on your committee of responsible people if you do have to run a race, and you should know how to do it if you need to.
Thank you. And I think that's going to conclude our question and answers. And so at this time, oh, never mind. I take that back. I just got a question in, and we do have time to address a few more. This question is for Mr. Harvey. Okay, this question actually has already been asked. This is somebody asking, is there any practice area that the JNC weighs more or less. But I think it's a really good question because I think many times we see people elevated who are prosecutors. And so a lot of times people wonder if that area is a better area to, a better path to travel career-wise. And then many times as prosecutors, I'm a former prosecutor, we get a lot more trial experience than maybe somebody who went into civil practice. So when you see a prosecutor come before you, somebody like Judge Collins, or if it was me, we're gonna have like 100 trials under our belt. And if you see maybe a civil lawyer, maybe they have 6, And so I think I'm gonna add to their question, not just practice areas, but number of trials, number of mediations. How are you weighing all of that stuff? How do you consider different career paths and then different levels of experience, considering that maybe a prosecutor is going to have more of something than a civil lawyer?
Well, I can answer. I mean, I think that, trial experience is always going to be a plus. You're not applying to the 4th DCA. So, but that could be on either side of the V, right? It could be as a public defender. It could be as a prosecutor. It could be as a civil attorney. It could be a civil attorney on either side of the V. So I would say that, I think we get more prosecutors who apply. So, it's somewhat of a numbers game. We see more prosecutors, I think, than we see public defenders. We probably see less civil litigators on either side of plaintiffs or defendants come before us. So, and since since this is from the Palm Beach County Justice Association, we don't see a lot of personal injury attorneys apply. But that's not to say that they shouldn't apply. And just as a matter of sort of interest, the most recent person who was appointed to the JNC is a direct appointment by the governor, was a personal injury lawyer, all his life, who's relocated to Florida from New York. So I think that should sort of let you know that it's not all fields are open, and we're certainly not looking for any particular background, whether it's to sit on the JNC or to become a judge.
And we got one more question in. Does serving on a JNC make you ineligible to serve as a judge? And that's to Mr. Harvey.
It doesn't make you ineligible to become a judge. It makes you ineligible to be appointed by the commission that you sat on. You have like a 2-year cooling off period. So somebody who's sitting on the 15th JNC, and once their term ends, they have to wait 2 years before they could apply. Doesn't prevent them from applying to, the 4th or the Supreme Court or any other JNC that they weren't a member of. But there is a 2-year, cooling off period to apply to the same JNC in which they were appointed to.
Thank you. And with that last question, I'm going to turn this over to our committee chair, Burns Gilliam.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Burns Guillaume. I am a member of Palm Beach County Justice Association. Before I make my final remarks, I wanted to introduce our president, Andrew Harris. Andrew Harris, you want to say a few words?
Sure. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of the PBCJ, I just want to thank Judge Harper, Judge Collins. Thanks so much for being here and giving so much insight. I know Mr. Harvey mentioned we don't see too often folks in our organization who are running for judge, but that does not diminish our commitment to the judiciary. Everywhere I go and I speak, and I feel like a broken record, but I think we have the best judiciary in the state. We don't have any evidence for that, but I see that I'm an appellate lawyer by trade. So I see all sorts of circuit court judges out there, trial judges across the state. So I think we're really blessed. Now, the bad news for folks who are interested in becoming judge is there's a lot of competition out there because of the rich history that we have in our judiciary. And I just saw the names that went up for the recent appointment, and all of them, gosh, I don't know how the governor, can even, I think that's a tribute to the process that we see here. And so to the JNC, to Mr. Harvey and the work that they do. So, but anyways, thank you all, Destiny. Thanks for having us and letting us sponsor with you, and great job moderating. So thank you all.
Thank you, Andrew. And thank you all to the panelists who graciously volunteer their time for our webinar, Journey to the Gavel. Thank you to the planning committee, which consists of Shelley Baker, Heather Stolman, Sandra Moses, and our gracious moderator who did a fantastic job, Destiny Baker Sutton. As we close this journey to the Gavel Forum, we cannot stress enough how important it is for anyone interested in becoming a judge to do their research, to understand the different avenues, and to make a plan that will assist them in reaching their goals. The journey to the bench has been described as a wonderful and intense process. We hope that our presentation today clarified the process. Thank you for joining us. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.